Welcome back everyone for another lesson. I stopped doing lessons for a couple of weeks because not many people were watching them and I didn't hear from many people about whether you were using them, but a couple of people have asked me for some game analysis again, so I'm doing another one. Let me know if you like it or if you want me to keep doing them, and I'll do it again next week. I just had an exciting game with Randir, who some of you might remember if you've been to the inter-school tournament. He got the first place and he's now got a score online higher than me, and I think he won more games than me when we played a bunch of games. So it's really exciting to see a lot of young students get better and better, and I hope lots of you one day will be able to kick my butt. So even if you haven't been playing long and it seems like a long way off to beat some people that are way better than you, if you keep practicing for a while, one day I think a lot of you good players will be able to beat me, hopefully, or beat your other teacher that you have at school, or your parents, or whoever it is you hope to get better than. So it's good to see we've had the same regular people coming online and playing each day, still having about 9 players. Hopefully by now you are really familiar with some of the other players who you've been playing with. And we had the most interesting game from the weekend I chose was from Sunday. The top game on Saturday was a 4-move checkmate, which probably isn't very interesting for you. So instead, this Sunday game was between Jesse and Ilei. As you can see, their online scores now for a 10-minute game, people have different scores for different amounts of time. We've got 980 for Jesse and 1,000 for Ilei. It's getting pretty strong. If anyone gets up to 1,200 or 1,300, feel free to send me a challenge online and I'll give you a game. I think that might happen for a few of you in the next year or two. So here was the top game for the top position to decide. We had Ilei opening with the king's pawn. This is known as an English defense. Horses coming out early. Looks pretty reasonable. How many black pieces are attacking that pawn? We have 2. How many defenders does white have? We've got 2 here. So if you want, with your black, you could swap. Instead of swapping, I wouldn't mind just sending this pawn out and probably holding my position in the middle. And good idea. Jesse is defending this pawn with which piece? The bishop over here. So would you take if you're white? I probably wouldn't, because you're not meant to move a piece 2 times at the beginning. We want to move each piece once. So if you took, it helps black develop and black would be ready to castle. And good idea, white doesn't do it and attacks this horse, which is a pretty good move because black's only got one decent spot to go, really. Where would you go if you're black? In the middle. Would you take if you're white and swap horses? So we both lost a horse, but who got a better position now? Just think about the black pawns here. Black had to take back with the pawn. Do you want your pawns in front of each other? No, they're not very strong like that. They're called doubled pawns. So white's got a little advantage maybe. White gets ready to castle. Black gets ready to castle. Or Ilei decides to swap. Would you bother doing this? I probably wouldn't bother sending my bishop all the way out and doing 2 moves just to swap. But as you know, horses and bishops are about the same value. Black's still got doubled up pawns here. White castles, black castles. Oops, sorry. Let's get back to that. We were up to here. White castles, black castles. Bishop is the next logical piece to come out. And if I'm black, I really want to swap off this pawn. I'm hoping to take this pawn. So then I wouldn't have double pawns. That's what I'd do. Next logical piece to develop is the bishop. Very good. Now black has no doubled pawns. Pretty even position now. Now black could develop these pawns and attack the bishop. I wouldn't mind getting this bishop out. If I was black, that would be the next thing. Ilei moves the bishop away. And black's offering a swap. Is this a good swap? Is this going to get black's pawn chain in a good position? Good structure. I would swap if I'm white now, and black will have doubled pawns again. And Ilei does, very good. So I'd say now white maybe has a little bit of an advantage. This pawn isn't going to be very strong. These ones aren't particularly strong. Castle's in the middle, that's where we want them now. And this is a really good move. I'd say maybe black's got an advantage now. As you know, this is a pin, the horse can't move. If you want to get out of a pin, what would you do? Well, we usually want to move the important piece that's behind somewhere, but we have to defend the horse, because if we don't defend the horse with the queen, if the bishop takes, what are you going to take back with? It's going to be the pawn. And then how's your pawn structure? How would white's defense be then? Not very good. So I might defend the horse with like the rook could be used, or the queen could come up to d3, and that would get rid of the pin. Ilei instead moves the pawns. I don't know what he's planning there. And Jesse offers a swap. And they both decide to swap pawns, and now they've both got really weak pawns. So if you ever see this, the pawns aren't defending each other in a chain. We know these pawns are weak. You want to attack these pawns. They're really easy to pick up. So I'd expect at this point, most of these pawns are going to get taken easily. Not easy to defend. Ilei doesn't want to swap queens. Look, the queens are facing each other. He decides to move it out of the way. Would you do that if you're black? Was that bishop in a good position? It was a really useful bishop. I'd definitely keep it where it was. I wouldn't have swapped. And we're both down to a queen and 2 rooks and even pawns. So perfectly even on pieces. Position's pretty even. It's a good idea. Jesse gets his queen on this side of the board. We want to start to attack the king. But he has given white a free piece. And as you can see, it's hard to defend these pawns. What do you think about this move? Is that a good spot to put the rook? We can see what Jesse wants to do. He wants to attack this pawn. He's now got 2 attackers. Good idea, but which rook would you use? This rook or this rook? Because he's moved this one's now blocked. So this one can't move. White comes back and defends. There's now 2 pieces defending the pawn. Black's getting ready to get a 3rd attacker. So you know what Black's going to do. If you're trying to think ahead, if you're white, you would need a 3rd defender. So I'd want to get this castle out, or maybe bring my pawns up here into a chain to defend. Could be good. But instead, Ilei picks up a free pawn. Fair enough. And instead of going after the pawn, actually, Jesse's decided. What's he planning? Going for the checkmate in one move. What would you do to stop the checkmate? You could defend the pawn or move the pawn. And moving the pawn looks pretty good. Pawn can't be taken. And Jesse wants to keep up the attack. He's going for this next pawn. In the meantime, Ilei looks like he's chasing this pawn. And Black's ready for another checkmate. Pause the video if you want and think about what would you do to get out of checkmate now. There's only one really good option. You could run away with your king, but we don't want to lose this defense in this pawn. So how would you save the pawn? I hope everyone thought the answer was to move this pawn out. Now, something to notice here, if you ever see this sort of pawn structure defending the king, if I get a castle or a queen on this line, I've pinned this pawn. Keep that in mind, because there might be a position coming up where you'll have to think about what's this pawn doing. If it's pinned, it can't really help to defend anything else. Let's see. Queen comes out of the corner. Ilei picks up another pawn. Who's winning now? Maybe pause the game and think, who would you prefer to be now? It looks pretty obvious. These pawns are called passed pawns. These pawns can easily run to the end, turn into queens. So I'd say white's got a big advantage. I don't know what Jesse's planning here. That's a good idea by Ilei. We want to push this pawn towards the end. And he puts pressure on this pawn. We do have to stop this pawn. Black's got 2 attackers. And now Ilei's got 2 defenders. What is the queen doing here? Remember, keep in mind, this is now a pinned pawn. This pawn can't move. So what can you take now if you're black? I would be taking this pawn. Good idea to move this pawn, because I think the black queen here was intending to take it, and we want to get these pawns to the end. And they're having a little race trying to get a pawn to the end, but white's got a big advantage. Black now has 3 attackers on this pawn. And is there any way white can defend it? Not really. So I think that pawn's going to be given up. He's ready to come and defend it with another rook, but too late. What would you do now? If you move the queen away, you lose the rook. Unless, where could you put the queen? You could come here to b8 for check. But the easy option would be to swap. And we could have another swap. Would you swap again? I would, because usually if you've got more pieces, you want to try and swap. So white accepts the swap, and we're down to only rooks and pawns. White's got 2 extra pawns, which is a big difference now. And here's the critical point. Just ask yourself, are there many attacking pieces on the board now? Does your king have to be careful? Does your king need to stay back and be defended? Or would you bring him out? Actually, the king's critical, really important for attacking now, and really important for getting the pawns either to the end or to take your opponent's pawns. So you'll see the person who does well in this game is probably going to be the person who brings the king out in the middle to attack. Good idea, trying to get the pawn to the end. And here's the thing, it looks good for white, but you don't want to try and rush these pawns to the end if you calculate that the black king is going to be able to come over and stop them. We only want to push the pawns forward once the white king has come over far enough to support them. So the black king gets a head start. And I think Eli's excited, trying to push these pawns too early. And just ask yourself, are these white pawns going to get to the end like this? Even though white's got an advantage, the black king's over here in the action. This white king's too far away. So I think now he realizes he needs to bring the king over. Free pawn, still one extra pawn. And now, if I was black, I'd take this pawn. Because let's see, if the castle takes, and we swap castles, then we're going to be 3 pawns against 3 pawns. But the only thing is, remember then, the white king is going to be in the action. This is where it will be important. So black doesn't swap. The white king's in a good spot now. We've got a couple of pawn swaps. And the white king's in a much better spot now. And the black king either has to commit to getting this pawn or going this way. And this is when white has an advantage with the extra pawn. The king can only be on one side of the board at once, and then the other side will be a bit of a weakness. So this white pawn, it's pretty hard to stop this white pawn now. Check, check. White's still 1 pawn up. Now here's the critical thing. If you were black here, if you were white here, which direction would you move your king to get out of check? I hope everyone would realize you want to go forward to protect the pawn. We don't want to come on this side of the board. Now this castle can isolate the king. And it's a bit hard for white to support this pawn. So we've got to check, again, which side would you bring the black king to? I'd go up, and you could probably get the pawn. And they're running their kings up. Again, they realize they want to be closer with the king to the pawn. And what would you do now if you're black? If you take the castle, then white's going to end up with a queen. This is probably a better option. Now it's king and castle against king. Does anyone know? Is this a draw or checkmate? And it should be possible for white to get a checkmate if you know what you're doing, but it's pretty tricky. You have to use your king to slowly get this king into the corner. So use your white king to keep getting closer and closer to the black king, block the black king from getting closer to the middle, and then when the king's in the corner, we can finally get a checkmate with the castle. It seems like Eli wasn't too sure about how to do that, but he did actually get the black king closer and closer to the corner. Just watch, I'll do some quick moves. The black king slowly gets closer and closer to the corner, which is what we want to do, and I'm not sure why, but this game ended in a draw. I think because these boys must have offered a draw and agreed. But the black king was actually getting in the corner. This is a good idea for white. You just have to be careful. If you're white, you've played so well, you sort of deserve to win now. You don't want to get a draw because black couldn't move anywhere legally, and you don't want to get a draw because you get in the same position 3 times. So, check. And they had a draw here. I think they must have agreed to a draw. So white probably played better having the extra castle at the end here. And the thing we all want to remember here is white got the advantage by getting the king in the right position at the end. You don't want your king staying back and defending at the end. You need your king to come out and attack the other person's pawns and support your pawns to get to the end. Very good game. Thank you, Ilei and Jesse. I'll do another video next week if you guys want to see it. So if anyone enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments and I'll make another one. Have a good homeschooling, or if you're at school, being back at normal school, and we'll see you next term.